They say a parent is only as happy as their child. If that's true, then for almost 2 years, I was quietly falling apart. My name's Travis Miller. I'm a single dad, ex-auto mechanic, and, somewhat unbelievably, the founder of a multi-million-dollar startup. But it didn't start with ambition or a breakthrough idea. It started with my son, Eli, coming home from school one winter afternoon with a split lip and wet shoes. Again. We live in Bozeman, Montana. Beautiful skies, bitter winters, a population small enough for gossip to spread like wildfire, but big enough for people to pretend they're too busy to care. Eli was always a soft kid. Not weak, just gentle, sensitive. He loved drawing dinosaurs more than playing football, and he cried when the neighbor's cat died. I never tried to change that. I figured the world had enough tough guys. But the sixth grade boys at Franklin Middle didn't see it that way. The bullying started small, a crumpled drawing, a cruel nickname, but it escalated fast. By the time I really noticed, like truly noticed, Eli was eating lunch in the janitor's closet and asking me if he could switch schools. He stopped smiling. He stopped asking for pancakes on Sundays. He started whispering, even at home, like the whole world was one big threat. I complained to the school, sure. Had meetings, wrote emails. I even confronted one of the kids' dads in the Safeway parking lot. But nothing changed. They kept telling me kids are resilient. Well, guess what? My kid was unraveling. One night I found a crumpled sketch under Eli's bed, a drawing of himself with exaggerated tears, standing alone on a playground while a group of faceless kids laughed. It broke me, like a sledgehammer to the chest. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I was doing with my life, working 12-hour shifts at the auto shop, barely keeping up with bills, while my son was learning to hate the world. That's when the thought hit me, hard and loud. If the world isn't going to be kind to him, then I will build one that is. It sounded ridiculous, even to myself, but something shifted that night. I wasn't going to fight the school anymore. I wasn't just going to raise awareness. I was going to make money. Serious money, and use it to give Eli the life, the school, and the respect he deserved. Problem was, I had no clue where to start. I wasn't a tech guy. I wasn't even good at computers, but I was good with my hands, and I had one other thing. I used to tinker with little woodshop toys for Eli when he was younger. Simple stuff, fidget cubes, animal puzzles, even a dinosaur-themed comm box with sliding wooden tiles he loved. That's when the memory clicked. Eli's favorite toy, a small wooden cube with gears and buttons that he once said made him feel safe. He called it his bravery box. I got up, pulled it from the closet, and stared at it like it had the answers. What if there were more kids like Eli? Kids who didn't need more lectures, but something tactile, something they could touch, feel, something to help them breathe when life got too loud. By morning, I had a plan. Messy, vague, but a plan nonetheless. I'd turn my garage into a workshop, build a batch of these bravery boxes, sell them online. If nothing else, maybe I'd make enough to send Eli to a better school, one where kids didn't mock you for being kind. I didn't tell Eli yet. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to show him the world could still have good in it, that it could still bend for people like him. So, that week, I quit my job. Everyone thought I'd lost it. Maybe I had. But for the first time in years, I felt awake. Converting my garage into a workshop wasn't glamorous. The floor was cracked, the insulation was garbage, and the only real tools I had were the ones I used to fix up old Chevys. But every night, after Eli went to bed, I sketched designs and studied YouTube videos on woodworking, product design, and e-commerce like my life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. I had about $1,200 saved up, hardly a startup budget. I spent most of it on decent pine wood, a small laser engraver, and some basic packaging materials. I gave up cable, canceled anything that wasn't essential, and started eating ramen like I was back in college. My hands blistered. My first prototypes looked like junk, but slowly, piece by piece, they got better. Each box had sliding parts, gears that turned, tiny compartments that opened with satisfying clicks, smooth wooden buttons that pressed in and popped back out. No screens, no lights, just something tactile and calming. I called them quiet cubes. Eli noticed me working late but didn't ask much. He thought I was building something for his birthday. I built 10 cubes and set up a simple Shopify page. I took pictures with my phone on an old flannel shirt, wrote a heartfelt product description, and posted it in a couple of parenting groups on Facebook and Reddit, explaining how the cube had helped my son cope with anxiety. That night, I sold 6. 6! I remember staring at my screen, my mouth open, half convinced it was a glitch. By the next day, the other 4 were gone, and there was a wait list of 14 people asking when more would be available. I stayed up until 3 a.m. making more. Then something unexpected happened. A therapist from Portland messaged me. She said one of her clients had brought in a quiet cube, and she wanted to order 10 more for her clinic. She also asked if I'd ever considered making customized versions for kids with ADHD or sensory disorders. I told her yes, even though the truth was I hadn't even thought that far ahead. Over the next 3 weeks, orders kept rolling in. Not a flood, but steady. I was making 2 or 3 dozen cubes a week and barely keeping up. But more than the money, the messages I got meant everything. My daughter brings hers everywhere. Thank you. This helped my son fall asleep without a meltdown for the first time in weeks. Is there a version for adults? I want one for my office. Eli still didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to tell him until I could show him something real, something big. So one night, I picked him up from school. He had a new bruise on his arm, but he didn't want to talk about it. And I said, "Hey, bud, I want to show you something I've been working on." We went into the garage. I handed him one of the latest quiet cubes, a dark walnut model with his initials engraved on the corner. He looked at it, turned it over in his hands, slid the gears, pushed the buttons, then looked up at me. "Wait, you made this?" "I did," I said. "I've been making a lot of them. People are buying them. Therapists, parents, even some teachers." Eli's eyes widened. "Like, you sell these?" I nodded. "Started a little business, actually." Eli really smiled for the first time in a long time. He hugged me hard and didn't let go for a full minute. That night, he sat at the table and helped me assemble parts. He was better with the fine details than I was. The next week, I told him I was saving up to send him to a different school, a private school, just across town, with smaller class sizes and zero tolerance for bullying. His eyes lit up again, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded, quietly. 2 weeks later, a blogger wrote about quiet cubes. Then a local news station reached out. I almost didn't respond. I'm not great with attention, but something told me to go for it. They filmed a short piece. Eli and I both appeared in it, though I asked them to keep his face off camera. That news story changed everything. The night it aired, my website crashed from traffic. By morning, I had 418 orders. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen, both thrilled and completely panicked. I couldn't make that many cubes in a week, or even a month. But I was done thinking small. I reached out to a retired carpenter I knew from the auto shop days, hired a high school kid to help with packaging, turned my friend's empty barn into an unofficial assembly line. Within 2 months, I was running a full-fledged small business. And for the first time in forever, Eli didn't dread going to school. Because he wasn't at Franklin anymore. He was at a new school, with new teachers, new friends, and for once, he wasn't the weird, quiet kid. He was the kid whose dad invented something cool. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. But this was just the beginning.
By spring, Quiet Cubes had become more than just a garage project. We had a small team, 6 people total, and orders were coming in from all over the country. I still couldn't believe it. Just a few months earlier, I was scraping together grocery money. Now I was fielding emails from educational therapists in California and toy distributors in Chicago. But even with all the growth, I kept it personal. Every cube still came with a handwritten note, usually from me or Eli, thanking the buyer and wishing them peace. People seemed to love that. Some even framed the notes. I remember one particular order. A woman from Arizona emailed me after her cube arrived. Her son was nonverbal and had severe autism. She said he had never fixated on any toy or object before, until the cube. He carried it everywhere, slept with it, tapped the gears when he got anxious. For the first time in years, she said, she felt like he had found something that made the world make sense. That message hit me hard. I sat in the shop for an hour just staring at the screen. Eli came in, noticed my face, and asked, "Was it a bad email?" I showed it to him. He didn't say anything at first. Then, without looking at me, he mumbled, "That's kind of how I feel too." I don't know if he realized how much that meant to me. I don't even know if he remembers saying it, but I do. We added a new product after that, a softer, silicone-edged version for younger kids. Eli helped name it the Hug Cube. I'll admit, I got a little teary when we added it to the store. One day, we got an email from a woman named Lisa, who worked at a national chain of educational toy stores. She wanted to schedule a meeting, said she saw the news segment and had been following our growth, asked if I had ever considered a licensing deal. I nearly deleted the message. I didn't think we were ready for something like that. But my old friend Pete, the carpenter I'd brought in to help, told me not to be stupid. So, I called her. Lisa turned out to be sharp, experienced, and, more importantly, genuine. She didn't want to turn Quiet Cubes into a cheap plastic knockoff brand. She wanted to help me scale without losing the soul of the product. We talked for 3 hours. A week later, I flew to Minneapolis, first time I'd been on a plane in over a decade, to visit their headquarters. They showed me prototype packaging, potential store displays, even digital mock-ups of an app that could complement the cubes with calming sounds and breathing exercises. It all felt surreal. I called Eli from the hotel that night. "Dad, are you gonna be famous now?" I laughed. "I don't think so, buddy, but maybe the cubes will be." He was quiet for a second, then asked, "Does that mean more kids like me will have them?" My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "That's the plan." The licensing deal was fair. More than fair, actually. They offered a solid upfront payment and a generous royalty on each sale. I could keep making a limited run of handmade cubes for collectors and therapists, and they'd handle mass production of the standard versions. I signed the deal in May. By July, Quiet Cubes were on shelves in 214 stores across the country. I still worked out of the barn, but now it had AC, proper lighting, and a staff of 12. We had a shipping team, a product developer, even a part-time social media manager. I hired a local dad who'd lost his job in the pandemic to handle inventory. People started calling me an entrepreneur. That felt weird. I was still just a guy who wanted to help his kid. Speaking of Eli, everything changed for him too. He came home one day with a certificate of recognition. Most improved student, it said. I framed it immediately. He started taking art classes, joined the chess club, even made a couple real friends. I found him one night sitting in the living room, sketching ideas for a new kind of cube. A cube with pop-out parts and a magnetic core. He called it the Infinity Box. I nearly cried. We built the first prototype together. Took us 3 weekends. It wasn't perfect, but it was his, and it worked. The next school assembly, they asked him to speak about Quiet Cubes. He stood on stage in front of 200 kids and teachers and talked for 5 whole minutes. No stammering, no freezing. He even made a joke. Afterwards, he looked at me and whispered, "I didn't even feel scared." That was the moment I knew the money didn't matter, the success didn't matter. This was why I'd done it. For him. For the kid who used to eat lunch alone behind the library. For the boy who once asked if it was his fault that other kids didn't like him. Now he was the one helping others, inspiring them, leading. He was my miracle. That fall, Eli and I were invited to speak at a regional tech conference in Austin. The theme was Innovation with Impact, and someone on the organizing committee had come across our story. They wanted us to share how a handmade wooden cube became a national product, and how a father and son turned adversity into something powerful. I almost turned it down. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't polished. I still wore flannel shirts with worn-out elbows and didn't know the first thing about TED Talk-style pacing. But Eli wanted to go, badly, so we said yes. The auditorium was packed, maybe 600 people, with another 200 watching online. Eli gripped my hand tightly backstage. He was wearing the blazer we'd bought for his 6th grade graduation, which now fit perfectly. I whispered, "We just tell the truth, that's all." He nodded, and then we stepped into the lights. I started by telling the room about the day I found Eli crying in the bathroom, about how powerless I'd felt, about the cardboard and duct tape and sleepless nights. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them I wasn't some brilliant inventor, just a desperate dad. Then Eli took over. He talked about how the cubes helped him focus, how building them made him feel calm and proud. He even made a joke about being the only kid in Texas who runs a side hustle with his dad. The audience erupted in laughter and applause. By the time we walked off stage, people were in tears. One woman came up and said, "Your story gave me the courage to help my own son." A man from Seattle emailed us the next day offering to invest in our expansion. It was overwhelming, beautiful, but overwhelming. After the conference, things snowballed again. A popular parenting podcast featured our story, then came a segment on a national morning show. A literary agent reached out asking if we'd ever considered a children's book based on Eli's designs. We said yes to all of it. The children's book, Eli and the Quiet Cube, became a bestseller on Amazon within 2 weeks. Illustrated by a local artist, it followed a young boy who builds a cube to quiet the world and discovers he can help others too. We donated half the profits to school mental health programs. That December, I found myself standing in the middle of Times Square, holding Eli's hand, watching a massive screen flash our story. From Bullied to Brilliant, the boy behind the cube. His face lit up. I looked at him and said, "So, pretty famous now, huh?" He grinned. "I guess we both are." But fame was never the goal. We continued to grow quietly, on our terms. We opened a modest headquarters in Boulder, Colorado. Eli chose the location because, in his words, the mountains look like they're thinking. I hired staff from underserved communities, especially parents with neurodivergent kids. They got it. They understood the mission. And the workspace was designed with sensory needs in mind. Soft lighting, quiet zones, flexible hours. Eli kept creating. He designed 3 more cube variations, each inspired by something he struggled with, one to help with transitions, one for anxiety, and one just for fun. He insisted we make them affordable. This shouldn't be only for rich kids, he said. Every time we hit a milestone, 1,000 units sold, 100 schools using our cubes, first international order, we celebrated with a pancake breakfast and no phones allowed. Just conversation, food, and gratitude. But despite everything, the money, the success, the attention, I still thought about that first cube, the one made from leftover wood and hope, the one that started it all. I kept it on my desk in a glass case, not because it was perfect. It wasn't. The corners were uneven, the gears a little stiff, but it reminded me of who we were before all this, before the applause, before the fame. Just a dad, just a son, just a cube. That winter, Eli and I were invited to speak at a congressional panel on childhood mental health. Sitting in that grand chamber, surrounded by senators and experts, I looked over and saw my son, no longer a scared, quiet boy, but a confident, thoughtful young man. He was the one giving answers. He was the one inspiring change. I didn't say much that day. I didn't need to. My job was done. Or maybe it had just begun.
Spring brought fresh momentum. Our products were now in over 500 schools across the U.S., and we'd begun collaborating with occupational therapists to refine the designs even further. Eli had the idea to create a special build-your-own cube kit that students could assemble themselves, a tactile, empowering experience that encouraged creativity and gave kids a deeper connection to the tool. We launched it as a trial in a few middle schools in Oregon and Illinois. The response was overwhelming. One teacher wrote to us, "I've never seen my students this focused. For the first time, my kids feel like they're not broken, just different, and that's okay." I read the email 3 times before forwarding it to Eli. His response? A thumbs up emoji and a line. "Cool, let's do more." That was Eli. Never too high, never too low, always moving forward. But not everything was smooth sailing. With growth came attention, not just from media, but from competitors. One large toy company sent us a cease and desist letter claiming our product infringed on a vague patent they held. Their offer? Sell them the company for $4.2 million and walk away quietly. I remember pacing the kitchen that night, letter in hand, heart racing. $4.2 million. That could secure Eli's college, a house, our future, everything. But it would also mean giving up control, giving up our mission, and risking our product being turned into another commercialized gimmick without soul. I sat down across from Eli and explained everything. He listened quietly, then asked one question. Would they still give cubes to the kids who need them? I paused. Probably not. He shrugged. Then it's a no. That was it. We fought back, hired a lawyer, launched a campaign called Built for Purpose, and told our story publicly. The response from parents, teachers, and even therapists was fierce. People rallied around us. Some even canceled subscriptions to that toy company's products. A month later, the company quietly withdrew the complaint. That night, Eli and I ordered pizza and played video games until 2 a.m. The wins, we learned, were best enjoyed with greasy fingers and laughter. But one of the most unexpected moments came that summer. We were invited to Harvard, yes, Harvard, to talk with graduate students in education and design. They'd read about our work in a case study and wanted to understand how a simple wooden cube created ripple effects across classrooms. Standing in that lecture hall, surrounded by future leaders, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was a furniture maker with no degree. But I'd built something real, something needed. And Eli? He was the star of the show. He spoke like he'd done it 100 times, explaining how his mind worked, what fidgeting meant to him, and how kids like him didn't need fixing, they needed tools. They needed dignity. One student raised their hand and asked, "Eli, what do you want to do when you grow up?" Eli smiled and said, "I think I already am grown up, but maybe I'll make a cube for adults next. My dad could use one." The room burst into laughter. When we flew home, I stared out the plane window, watching clouds drift by like thoughts. This entire journey, from that bathroom door to boardrooms and book deals, hadn't just changed our lives, it'd given us a purpose bigger than pain. It had turned broken moments into building blocks. And as Eli leaned his head on my shoulder mid-flight and whispered, "Thanks for not giving up on me," I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Whole. The fall of that year brought a sense of stability, the kind I hadn't known in a long time. Our company, now called Mindcraft Tools, had grown into a small but mighty team of designers, educators, and child psychologists. We were still based in Boise, Idaho, our humble HQ just 2 blocks from the workshop where it all began. Every Monday morning, Eli and I would bike there together. I'd drop him off at school, then pedal over to the office, my coffee sloshing in a metal thermos, and a knot of disbelief always lingering in my chest. I had no MBA, no formal training in anything we were doing, and yet here I was, running a company, giving TED Talks, speaking at PTA conferences, and watching my son thrive in ways I never imagined. Eli had become somewhat of a quiet icon among neurodivergent kids. They saw him not as a spokesperson, but as one of them, real, unfiltered. He started writing blog posts for our site, short, funny reflections with titles like "Why Chairs Should Be Illegal" and "Sometimes My Brain is a Bouncy Castle." His voice was raw and honest, and it connected. One particular piece, "Dear Teacher, Here's Why I Can't Sit Still went viral. We received thousands of messages from exhausted parents, curious teachers, even pediatricians. I printed a few out and taped them to my office wall. A reminder that one kid's restlessness could ripple across the world. But success didn't make life perfect. One afternoon, I got a call from Eli's school. He'd gotten into a fight, his first ever. Some older kid had mocked one of his blog posts in front of the cafeteria, called him Rain Man Jr., said his cubes were baby toys for broken kids. He didn't say a word. He just walked up and shoved the guy to the ground. When I arrived, he was sitting on the bench outside the principal's office, fists clenched in his lap. He said, "I'm not sorry," before I even opened my mouth. "I know," I replied. The principal, a kind woman named Miss Herrera, gave Eli a one-day suspension and pulled me aside to say, honestly, I might have done the same thing. That night, we didn't talk much. I didn't scold him, I didn't praise him. We just sat on the porch and watched the sunset, passing a cube back and forth like a peace offering. Eventually, he whispered, "Sometimes I hate being different." It cut through me like a blade. I said, "You're not different, you're you, and the world just hasn't caught up yet." He nodded, not fully convinced. And that's when I realized our mission wasn't just about fidget tools or focus cubes, it was about making room. Not just physical space, but emotional space, safe space, space where kids like Eli could exist without apology. So we expanded again. We started a scholarship program, the Makers Fund, offering grants to neurodivergent teens with creative ideas. We partnered with libraries to host Build Your Own Cube workshops. We even worked with prison education programs because, as one counselor told us, many of the adults behind bars were once kids like Eli, misunderstood and unaccommodated. The work was heavy sometimes, but it felt sacred. One morning, a letter arrived from a mom in Kentucky. Her son Milo had never made eye contact with anyone, not even her. But after 3 weeks of using one of our cubes in class, he'd begun speaking. Slowly, quietly, but surely. He'd even said, "I love you," for the first time. The note ended with, "You didn't just change his life, you changed mine." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I looked over at Eli, now taller than me, eating cereal straight from the box with one hand while spinning a cube in the other. This boy, once deemed broken by a system that didn't understand him, had become a builder of bridges between people, between ideas, between worlds. And me? I'd gone from a man scraping together invoices in a dusty woodshop to a father who had built an empire, not for wealth, but for justice. We didn't chase millions, but somehow millions had found us.
And what we gave in return was worth far more. By the following spring, Minecraft tools had grown beyond what I ever expected. We had opened the second office in Austin, Texas, a city buzzing with innovation, tech, and a vibrant community of educators and parents who genuinely cared about inclusion. Eli and I flew down together for the ribbon cutting. He was nervous. Crowds still made him uneasy. But when it came time for him to say a few words, he stood at the mic, took a deep breath, and said, "If you'd told me a few years ago I'd be speaking at something like this, I would have thought you were out of your mind. But here we are. I didn't get here because I got better. I got here because someone finally saw me." The room went completely still, then erupted into applause. Afterwards, a man approached me, tall, sharply dressed, probably mid-40s. He introduced himself as Calvin Ridge, a partner at one of the biggest venture firms on the West Coast. I knew the name. Everyone in the startup world did. He handed me a card and said, "You're solving a global problem in a beautiful way. I think we can help you scale. Think international." I took the card, shook his hand, and politely said we'd be in touch. That night, back at the hotel, I couldn't sleep. The idea of expanding was tempting. We could be in every school in the country, every therapy clinic, every home. But something in me hesitated. I wasn't sure if we were ready, not just as a company, but as a mission. Scaling fast meant compromising control, and I wasn't sure if the Calvin Ridges of the world understood what we were really about. Back in Boise, I brought it up with the team. We had a long meeting. Voices were raised, lines were drawn, but in the end we agreed. We'd grow, but on our terms. Instead of taking Ridge's money, we launched a Kickstarter-style campaign, not to raise cash, but to raise community. We called it Share the Spark. Each donation would send one of our cubes, custom-built for specific needs, to a child nominated by teachers or parents. Our goal was to fund 5,000 cubes in 3 months. We hit it in 4 days. The press took notice again. NPR did a segment. A journalist from The Atlantic flew out to shadow us for a week. They published a feature titled "The Father Who Built a Fortune to Save His Son." And I'll admit, that headline hit me hard, because the money wasn't the point. But still, it helped. We'd become a multi-million-dollar company by then. Comfortable, but not flashy. I still drove a 10-year-old Subaru. My house was modest. Eli's school was public. And that's how I wanted it. But behind the scenes, something was shifting. Eli had grown into a young man with ideas of his own. He wanted to study product design. He talked about starting his own foundation someday. And one day over lunch, he said, "Dad, do you think you'll ever move on? Like, let this company live without you?" I nearly choked on my sandwich. It hadn't occurred to me. This company had become my identity, not just as a builder or entrepreneur, but as a father. Letting it go felt like letting go of the fight that defined me. But I saw the look in his eyes, not cold or critical, just honest, curious. He wasn't asking for freedom, he was offering it. That night, I took a walk by the river. It was the same path I used to pace back when Eli was in 2nd grade, back when I was angry at the world and terrified of the future. I thought about the man I used to be, broke, confused, and full of guilt. And I thought about the man I'd become, fulfilled, purposeful, surrounded by good people doing good work. I realized something. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was his too. So 6 months later, on Eli's 18th birthday, I announced that I'd be stepping down as CEO. Not quitting, just stepping aside. I'd still be around, still building, still dreaming, but now I was making space for the next chapter. For Eli, for the kids who came after, for all the people out there who just needed someone to believe in them. And as I handed him a cube, the very first one we ever made, still dented and scarred, I said, "You were never broken. You were the blueprint." His eyes welled up, but he didn't cry. He just smiled. And in that smile, I saw the future. I kept a quieter role at the company after stepping down, focusing more on mentorship and product tinkering, the parts I truly loved. I gave talks at schools and conferences, usually alongside Eli. People didn't come for me anymore. They came for him, and I was more than proud to pass the mic. Our story, from the playground to the press, had started circulating in parenting groups, autism support communities, and even business leadership circles. Some called it inspirational. Others called it a masterclass in purpose-driven entrepreneurship. But for me, it was just life. Messy, emotional, full of hard lessons and beautiful surprises. The real turning point, though, came the following year. One evening, Eli and I were at a fundraiser in Portland for neurodivergent youth programs. We were chatting with families, signing cubes, taking photos. A woman approached me. Small frame, short hair, tears already brimming. She held my hand and whispered, "My son wouldn't speak to anyone. He was afraid of everything. Then his teacher brought in your cube set. He built a little safe house out of the pieces. It became his ritual. And slowly, he started talking. First to the teacher, then to us." Her voice cracked. Last week, she said, he stood in front of his class and told them how his brain works. I didn't have words. I just nodded, overwhelmed. Later that night, Eli and I sat at a diner, eating pancakes at midnight, something we hadn't since he was 10. He said, "I think we're doing something good, Dad." I looked at him, tall, confident, kind, and said, "You always have. I just had to catch up." That spring, Eli got accepted into Stanford's product design program. He almost didn't tell me at first, afraid I think that I'd feel left behind. But when he did, I didn't hesitate. I said, "We'll figure it out. It's your time." We moved him into the dorms in August. I helped him carry his boxes, made the usual dad jokes, and tried not to cry as I hugged him goodbye. Watching him walk away, backpack slung over one shoulder, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't losing him. I was gaining everything he was about to become. Back in Boise, the house was too quiet. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, there were no morning routines, no therapy appointments, no late-night panic over IEP meetings or social meltdowns. So I built a new prototype, something smaller, modular, designed for low-income school districts that couldn't afford high-tech versions of our tools. I called it the Spark Box. Within a month, I had a working model. I flew out to a few rural schools, did test sessions with kids who'd never had access to any kind of enrichment program. Some of them lit up the moment the cubes clicked together. Others needed time. But all of them, every single one, engaged. I knew then that this wasn't just about Eli anymore. It was about every kid who'd been underestimated. Every parent who'd been told, "We're doing the best we can." Every teacher who'd been left without resources. I launched a new initiative, the Spark Project, a nonprofit arm of our company aimed at getting hands-on creative learning tools into underserved schools across America. And the best part? Eli joined the board. Remotely, of course. He was busy in California, designing tools for kids with sensory issues. His own startup was gaining traction. It was different from mine, more tech-heavy, more experimental, but the heart was the same. I'd laid the foundation. He was building the future. A year later, I gave a TEDx talk titled "The Gift of One Voice." It wasn't flashy. I'm not a natural speaker. But I told the truth about my son, about fear, about the quiet power of believing in someone before the world does. Afterwards, a young man came up to me, probably 20, maybe younger, said he'd been diagnosed autistic at 14, dropped out of high school, and had been coding ever since. He said my story made him feel like he wasn't alone. I told him the truth. You're not. As I write this now, I'm sitting on the porch of our house in Boise, the same one I bought before everything changed. The sun is setting. There's a gentle breeze, and inside I can hear the whir of my 3D printer running. Another cube in the making. Eli's coming home tomorrow. Just for a weekend. But enough. He's bringing someone. A partner, he said. Smart, kind, likes weird tools. I smiled when he said that. Because that's what we are, really. A family of weird tools. Bent in places, scratched up, sometimes misunderstood, but always useful, always worth building with, always enough.